What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. Welcome to Splash City. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe. And before we get into it today, let's quickly talk about what's going on in the playoffs. The Suns advanced to the NBA Finals, and they will be playing the winner of Hawks-Bucks, of course. I will do a series preview for that whenever we know what the matchup is going to be. So, whoever wins that Bucks-Hawks series, then I will do a finals preview like I kind of did for the second round series there. We'll kind of talk about that when we get to it. But obviously great for the Suns, great for Chris Paul, Devin Booker, all them. Giannis injury sucks, hopefully Trae Young can get back soon. Hopefully Giannis can get back at some point this postseason, although I doubt it. And we'll kind of talk about that matchup when we know who is actually going to be playing out of the Eastern Conference. Other than that, we're just going to keep chugging along doing these offseason previews in the meantime while we wait for the NBA Finals to be set, and then we'll talk about, whoever wins the finals when that series is over. Other than that, it's just going to be straight offseason previews unless something really significant happens, like a trade or a big thing, offseason news type piece, maybe a rule change or whatever. We might talk about that. But that's the deal for upcoming content on the channel for the next couple of weeks. Now let's get into the Orlando Magic and their offseason. So the Magic, the last couple of offseason previews are teams that I had waited for after the lottery to talk about because I wanted to be sure where these picks were set. Teams like the Wolves, Thunder, Rockets, their offseason plans are very reliant on the lottery, as are the Orlando Magic. So now we know that they're keeping the Chicago Bulls pick. It was, the Bulls could have potentially jumped into the top 4 in order to keep it. However, the Magic will get that 8th overall spot from the Chicago Bulls, as well as their own 5th overall pick. So, you could argue they got a little bit unlucky in the lottery, considering that they were supposed to be in the top 3, but they ended up, falling down to that number 5 spot, and, they did get lucky in keeping the Bulls pick as well. So it's not the end of the world. You have 2 picks in the top 8, and, some ammunition if you want to potentially trade up. Maybe the Cavs or the Raptors are interested in trading down. The Magic could potentially make a move there, or if you want to just stick there and pick 2 players to add to their young core, that's fine too. They're going to be, obviously doing a lot of scouting over the next little while, figuring out who they want to pick in the draft. But they got some good options. This is a good draft here at the top, and they'll be able to get 2 nice players to add to their young core. Okay, so let's take a look at this cap sheet here. The Magic are going to be one of the few teams with a little bit of cap space to work with, not a ton, but with that Otto Porter contract coming off the books, and they don't really have too much else that they're paying, so they should be, be able to pay at least a little bit in free agency this summer if they want to. Obviously, you're not going to be really bringing in veterans trying to ring chase or anything, of course, or really, being a free agent star destination, but maybe bringing in a couple guys that you could potentially trade down the line or taking a chance on some younger players there. That should be what they're doing with their cap space here. So you have Otto Porter, a free agent this summer. I mean, he was, kind of just here to make the Vucevic trade work in terms of salary. He was the big matching piece in order to match that there, going from the Bulls to the Magic. And, I could see them being interested in bringing him back, actually, just to have a little bit of veteran leadership on this team, because you do need at least a little bit of that, because other than him, the team is very, very young, and so you might want to bring him back just for that reason. But I think, Otto Porter is a valuable guy for a contender to have on their roster, and he could actually get himself a nice payday, potentially going somewhere else for like a mid-level exception or something like that. So Otto Porter, I doubt they bring him back, although I wouldn't shock me completely, but he's obviously not going to get 28, 29 million a year like he has been making. It's going to be a significantly less deal if he does come back to the Magic. Gary Harris is on that expiring contract at $20 million. You could potentially trade him. We'll see what happens with him, but he was obviously brought in that Aaron Gordon swap from the Nuggets, and he's a guy who still has, a little bit of value. He's only 26 years old, and kind of has struggled over the last couple of years and dealt with a little bit of injuries here and there, but I think he can still play, and he's valuable to a good team. 20 million is probably a little bit too much for him, so it might be harder to trade than you might think, but there's probably a deal out there for Gary Harris, and you can find him a new home, especially on an expiring contract that holds a little bit of value in of itself. So I could definitely see him getting traded either this offseason or before the deadline. Terrence Ross is a guy that a lot of people were surprised didn't get moved at the trade deadline this past year, because obviously they had that big fire sale with Evan Fournier, Aaron Gordon, Nikola Vucevic, and Terrence Ross, was kind of one of those guys that people thought were going to get traded, but he ends up staying with the Magic. Now, he's still got 2 years left on that contract, and that's a very manageable deal for a player of his caliber. six-man type kind of coming in off the bench, lighting it up, is either hot and cold shooting wise, but obviously he's not afraid. So you take Terrence Ross, and I think a lot of contenders would want to get their hands on him as well. You could potentially get a younger player or a couple picks back for him. I would expect them to take a look at some trade offers for Terrence Ross because he's pretty clearly going to be on the trade block. It just makes sense for both sides there. Markelle Fultz going to be coming back from that injury. Actually, let's do this both in one. Markelle Fultz, Jonathan Isaac, both coming back from season-ending injuries that they suffered this past year. Isaac didn't play all of this last season. Markelle Fultz got injured early on in the year. Both of them are expected back for the start of next year, and obviously both part of this young core, 23 years old, and both are signed for the next couple of seasons, and the Magic are hoping that these guys will be able to come back, play well, and help this team regain relevance here. I could see Markelle Fultz having a bounce back year. I really think he can be, he's got a ton of potential left. There's a reason he was drafted first overall, and he dealt with a lot of shoulder stuff and some confidence issues when he was with Philly, but I thought he's actually played pretty well since he's been with Orlando, and if he's healthy, start coming into next year, I'm hoping for his sake that he's able to play well. Jonathan Isaac is another one, obviously defensive specialist. We know what he can do, and he's shown that he can have a really high ceiling as a player. Really came on his last year when he was healthy, but got hurt in the bubble and kind of struggled a little bit dealing with all these injuries over the last year or so. So unfortunate circumstances for Jonathan Isaac, but if he comes back, he's clearly a part of this young core, and I think the Magic and him are really hoping for a bounce back year from him as well. Mo Bamba and Wendell Carter Jr. both up for extensions on their rookie contract. You'll see Wendell Carter Jr. has that team option for his fourth year. I'm expecting they'll pick that up if they have not already. Sometimes Basketball Reference doesn't update these, so I fully expect them to pick up that team option, of course, and Mo Bamba's is already picked up. So those two will both be back on the team, assuming there's not a trade, of course. I think, both being up for extensions is a little weird. Bamba has not done much so far in his career. He was a guy I liked in the draft. And has not been super impressive so far in the NBA, but a lot of that is just Steve Clifford was kind of unwilling to play him for a lot of his couple of years in the NBA so far. So maybe under a new coach he gets some more consistent minutes and he's able to show what he can do. Wendell Carter Jr. came over from the Bulls and was pretty impressive in his couple of games with the Magic to end the year here. And I think he still has some potential left. So having both of those guys on the roster, two bigs from the same draft class, is a little bit interesting. I could see them wanting to potentially trade one of them to avoid a sort of crunch in the front court. But it's just talent. You like to have talent on the roster. I would anticipate that at least one of the two does end up getting traded. Maybe not this year, but maybe in a couple of years, if they extend both of them, you might want to trade one of them on that extension, or maybe you trade one of do a sign and trade when they enter restricted free agency next summer. But I don't think the team wants to bring both of them back, and they'll just see which one they can maybe get more value for, which one they feel like has a little more potential. Who knows? But they're both up for rookie extensions. I don't know what the number will be on either of them. Mo Bamba probably not very much. Wendell Carter Jr. could maybe get himself a little bit of money here. We'll have to see what they do, but it is an interesting situation having two young bigs from the same draft class. It's a little bit intriguing there, and it's kind of unique. Okay, moving on down here, James Ennis. I would not be shocked if they brought him back, actually. He's going to be a free agent this summer. And you might think, well, he's 30 years old, kind of wants to go be a ring chaser or whatever. But he might come back to the Magic with the promise of playing time. And like I said with Otto Porter, they do need a veteran on this team. They need a guy who's kind of a leader, voice in the locker room, elder statesman to kind of keep the young guys in line, because you can't just have a team with everybody 25 and under. You're going to have at least a couple of veterans. And so Ennis might be a candidate for that if he wants to come back, if he likes the city, likes his teammates, and with the promise of, being able to play a little bit, because I don't think he's quite at the level of being able to be a rotation player for a really good team. I think he's at a point in his career where he'd rather just get the playing time with the Magic, and if he wants to be that veteran leader, then I think that's a nice role for him. So they might want to bring him back. Cole Anthony, Chuma Okeke, both younger guys. I think both have a ton of potential. Both had solid rookie years. Obviously, Okeke kind of deferred his rookie year. He's almost in his second season, kind of, but not really, because he was drafted a year before and then chose to defer signing his contract while he recapped that knee injury that he suffered in college. And then Cole Anthony, was really good early on in the season, kind of dealt with some injuries for the second half of the year. But obviously, both these guys, super young, high potential. I fully expect the Magic to keep them around for the duration of these rookie contracts, because I think both of them are going to be a part of their future. Throw RJ Hampton into that group as well. He was brought in that, Aaron Gordon trade from the Nuggets. Also was a rookie this past season. I think he's got a high ceiling as well. Was a late first-round pick this past year. So I think he joins, Cole Anthony, Chuma Okeke, Markelle Fultz, Jonathan Isaac, Mo Bamba, Wendell Carter. It's a pretty solid young core. You got a lot of options there. And I think RJ Hampton is definitely, put himself in that Magic young core after his play for the second half of the year when he was getting consistent rotation minutes. Let's jump back up to Michael Carter-Williams. He's going to be expiring at $3 million. Wouldn't be shocked if he was, thrown into a trade to make money work somewhere. If you had to throw in that extra $3 million to like a Terrence Ross deal or maybe a deal for Mo Bamba, if you want to flip him, I could see, Michael Carter-Williams being that extra piece thrown in somewhere else. I don't love him as a player. The highlight of his NBA career was his first game ever. I think he dropped like a triple-double in his first game as a rookie or something like that. And ever since then, he's not been any better than that. So I don't love him. I think, he's okay. He can maybe be a rotation guy for a decent team. But for the Magic, they probably don't need him. So, he's going to be 30 next season. Maybe he does fit the bill of that veteran-type guy that they need, some of that leadership. But if you need to make a trade, you throw him in. He can maybe be a buyout guy mid-season, or you just cut him and eat the tax or eat the salary payment early on before the season even starts. I wouldn't be shocked if that either. So we'll see, but I don't think he'll be back. Dwayne Bacon is non-guaranteed for next season. I thought he was actually pretty solid, and I think he deserves another look. So I expect they'll probably bring him back next year, but we'll see. It's not super consequential either way. Mo Wagner, Iggy Brazdeikis were both kind of brought on late in the season. Both were cut from previous teams after the trade deadline, and I think they're both actually okay. Wagner, I was a little surprised the Celtics cut him, but I guess he wasn't that good for him. But he came in with Orlando and was actually pretty good down the stretch of the season. I think Brazdeikis, is only 22 and has a little bit of potential left. Didn't play very many games with the Magic, but when he did play, I thought he was okay. So both those guys, I wouldn't be shocked if the Magic brought them back on cheap, non-guaranteed deals. And then you have a couple of two-way players, Chasen Randall and Sindarius Thornwell. Thornwell was actually a draft crush of mine a couple of years ago. I know he had a big, NCAA tournament run with South Carolina, and he hasn't done much in the NBA, but he's one of those guys that I kind of have a soft spot for in the NBA. And Randall is like fine, but he's not great. So both those guys not super consequential either way. And then as far as the draft goes, you have the 5th pick. A lot of people have them linked to Jonathan Kuminga, and I tend to agree with that. I think he's a nice fit, in their front court. He can maybe play the 3 or the 4, and is one of those guys that has a really high potential. You can afford to wait for him. He might not be super good right away, but in a couple of years, he might reach a ceiling, and that's the window for the Magic anyway. They're not trying to be good next season or for the next 2 or 3. This is a full rebuild. It's going to take them a little bit to get back to full contention. That's the decision that they made when they traded away Vucevic, and I think it's going to end up paying off for them. So Kuminga could be a good pick at number 5. You maybe look at Scotty Barnes as well. Similar type of guy with a really high ceiling, but is a little bit of a raw prospect. He can't be super effective right out of the gate in his NBA career. At that 8th pick, you got a lot of other options as well. There's a ton of guys in this draft. You talk about James Bouknight, maybe Franz Wagner. Lots of guys in the top 10 of this draft, and the Magic have 2 cracks at it. They got 2 picks in the top 8, and you got a chance to add 2 more young guys to an already pretty solid young core. I kind of mentioned this before, but you've already got Markelle Fultz, John Isaac, Mo Bamba, Wendell Carter Jr., Chuma Okeke, Cole Anthony, RJ Hampton. That's pretty solid. You add 2 more guys to that, and you're looking pretty nice in a couple of years, assuming that at least a few of these guys end up panning out, because you have to assume that a few of these guys might not end up being great. Maybe Mo Bamba is already considered a bust to some people. You don't know about RJ Hampton. It's kind of early on him. Obviously, Cole Anthony, Chuma Okeke were both rookies, even though I thought they both had solid rookie seasons. You never really know. So, the Magic are just hoping that a couple of these guys end up panning out. Maybe 1 or 2 of them becomes an all-star in a couple of years. And at that point, then you're looking at getting back in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. So that's going to be the plan for Orlando. It's going to be, one of the longer rebuilds. They're kind of in this situation with a couple of teams at the bottom of the league. But the Magic are kind of here because they chose to be, right? They could have just held on to Vucevic Vucevic and Aaron Gordon and tried to, try to make a push for the 8th seed or making the play-in tournament in the Eastern Conference and trying to be an okay competitive playoff team like they have been for the past couple of years. But the team chose to sell off all the pieces at the deadline and try to really make a push for getting some really high draft picks over the next couple of seasons and building, an organic, homegrown, really good basketball team. And they're well on their way. Like I said, nice young core, got 2 more chances to add another talent to it this offseason. And I think this rebuild is going to be, they're not in the worst spot out of anybody in the league. Let's put it that way. And as I'm recording this, they still have not hired a coach. I'm recording this one on June 30th in the evening. So, by the time this goes up, they may hire a coach. They might hire one tomorrow by the time you're seeing this, or within the next couple of days. I'm assuming they're getting pretty close to their decision here. There was rumors about Penny Hardaway, but he pulled his name out. They've been talking to some of the assistants around the league, is the reporting. We'll see what they end up going with. It's not super consequential either way. Whoever is brought in to coach this team will be brought in with the awareness that this is going to be a couple of years of a rebuild before they can really start thinking about playoffs again. And as long as ownership is willing to give the new coach a significant amount of leeway, because this team is very young and inexperienced, and they're just not going to be very good. So I have no idea who they're going to hire as the coach. It doesn't really matter that much because it might be an unknown guy, which I will have no take on because I just have no idea how good a guy like Nate Bjorkgren or Mark Daigneault is going to be. A guy brought out of the G League or out of an assistant who has never been a head coach before. So we'll see what they do, but that's one thing of note. They also have not hired a head coach, so something to think about. But yeah, that's about all I have on the Orlando Magic and their, impending rebuild. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a like, ring the bell if you want to. Leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about this team. Are they, how competitive will they be next year? Are they going to have the worst record in the league? Who should they target in the draft? Would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. But with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one.